It's time for the Voice of Reason podcast. Here are your hosts, Sean Phillips, Andy Van Beber, and Travis Kirkendall.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so very much for joining us. This is the Voice of Reason podcast.
Greetings and salutations.
My name is Sean Phillips. As always, I'm joined alongside my co-host, Mr. Andrew Van Beber. V, how are we doing today? How's your week been so far?
Very well. The end of school cannot come quick enough because it just can't come quick enough because we've got one week and 1 day left. So, Finish line on year 26 for Mr. Van Bever.
Yep.
Year 26. And it's I don't feel any younger, any older, just a whole lot fatter and whatever else. So, but no, it's been a busy week. We had just a deluge of rain yesterday. First, my teaching career, every road that led into our school, where we live out, for those of you that are not familiar, our school district's out in the middle of nowhere, and every state highway leading into our school was flooded in. We technically were trapped out at school for nobody could get to us and nobody could get out unless you drove through about a foot of water rushing over the road. So that made for interesting talk yesterday. But that other than that, not much. Looking forward to summer vacation. How about yourself? How is the author doing?
So far, so good. Sales are great.
I am through chapter 2. I am through chapter 2 right now, so it'll take me a while, but yeah, I'm a slow reader, but yes.
No, that's all right. You're a teacher at Clopton, so that makes more sense than not. No, I'm excited. We've gotten a bunch of really good reviews in.
Good.
Now, if you do the search of the book, it's the first thing that pops up on Amazon.
Good.
So we're getting to the point here where we're going to be putting some of that income that's come into some targeted ads, and having her do some more self-promotion on different services and sites as well. So slow but steady wins the race. And then once we have an abundance of reviews, we can take those to publishers and then go from there and kind of continue to build and expand. So we're excited.
I did forget to tell you this, and sorry to our fans who reach out and watch us on TikTok. I failed to tell you this at the beginning, but the most interesting post that we had last week, our TikToks are AI generated, and so the most popular ones that AI thought that we would do is everything that we talked about Israeli and Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
However, those TikToks violated TikTok guidelines, and so those were not allowed to be put up on TikTok, and I protested it and I lost. So that's why we did not post any TikTok. Yep, womp, exactly. So that's why we didn't get any TikToks this week. But, hey, when you speak your mind and you're not politically in line with everybody else, you violate community standards. So,
well, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, is violating the social media standards. So some of you guys might not have seen this. It's kind of been on the more hush-hush of things, but I think it's just a matter of not enough Swifties have seen it yet.
Yeah.
But for those of you that know, one of my favorite football teams ever is the Kansas City Chiefs. Two-peat. We're going for the three-peat this year. Yes. But the kicker of the Kansas City Chiefs, one Mr. Harrison is it Butker or Butker?
Harrison Butker.
Harrison Butker
Mm-hmm.
has found himself in the hot seat for his commencement speech at Benedictine Catholic University, where he was speaking to the graduates of the university of 2024. And we are going to do a play-by-play of his speech. Um, and we're going to dissect it a little bit, because this is one of those open topics where there are people from the right praising him for his speech, and there are a lot more people that are pretty upset about some of the things that he said. And so we just kind of want to deep dive and kind of take a look at everything that's going on with what he has to say.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to break this. So this is about 20 minutes long. We're going to break this into, you'll still see us. We'll be here at the bottom of the screen. You'll see Harrison Butker at the top, and that way you can kind of get our reactions. But it's about 20 minutes long. We're going to break up in about 4 or 5 minute chunks, break it down as we go from there. And so without further ado, here is Mr. Butker.
Ladies and gentlemen of the class of 2024, I would like to start off by congratulating all of you for successfully making it to this achievement today. I'm sure your high school graduation was not what you had imagined, and most likely neither was your first couple years of college. By making it to this moment through all the adversity thrown your way from COVID, I hope you learned the important lessons that suffering in this life is only temporary. As a group, you witnessed firsthand how bad leaders who don't stay in their lane can have a negative impact on society. It is through this lens that I want to take stock of how we got to where we are and where we want to go as citizens and, yes, as Catholics. One last thing before I begin. I want to be sure to thank President Minnis and the board for their invitation to speak. When President Minnis first reached out a couple of months ago, I had originally said no. You see, last year I gave the commencement address at my alma mater, Georgia Tech.
That was me. Sorry there. Hold on a second, folks. I'm sorry. That was me.
Last year I gave the commencement address at my alma mater, Georgia Tech, and I felt that one graduation speech was more than enough, especially for someone who isn't a professional speaker. But of course, President Minnis used his gift of persuasion and spoke to the many challenges you all faced throughout the COVID fiasco and how you missed out on so many milestones the rest of us older people have taken for granted. While COVID might have played a large role throughout your formative years, it is not unique. Bad policies and poor leadership have negatively impacted major life issues. Things like abortion, IVF, surrogacy, euthanasia, as well as a growing support for degenerate cultural values in media all stem from the pervasiveness of disorder. Our own nation is led by a man who publicly and proudly proclaims his Catholic faith, but at the same time is delusional enough to make the sign of the cross during a pro-abortion rally. He has been so vocal in his support for the murder of innocent babies that I'm sure to many people it appears that you can be both Catholic and pro-choice. He is not alone. From the man behind the COVID lockdowns to the people pushing dangerous gender ideologies onto the youth of America, they all have a glaring thing in common. They are Catholic. This is an important reminder that being Catholic alone doesn't cut it. These are the sorts of things we are told in polite society to not bring up. You know, the difficult and unpleasant things. But if we are going to be men and women for this time in history, we need to stop pretending that the Church of Nice is a winning proposition. We must always speak and act in charity, but never mistake charity for cowardice. It is safe to say that over the past few years, I've gained quite the reputation for speaking my mind. I never envisioned myself nor wanted to have this sort of a platform, but God has given it to me, so I have no other choice but to embrace it and preach more hard truths about accepting your lane and staying in it. As members of the church founded by Jesus Christ, it is our duty and ultimately privilege to be authentically and unapologetically Catholic. Don't be mistaken, even within the church, people in polite Catholic circles will try to persuade you to remain silent. There even was an award-winning film called Silence, made by a fellow Catholic, wherein one of the main characters, a Jesuit priest, abandoned the church and as an apostate when he died as seen grasping a crucifix, quiet and unknown to anyone but God. As a friend of Benedictine College, His Excellency Bishop Robert Barron said in his review of the film, "It was exactly what the cultural elite want to see in Christianity: private, hidden away, and harmless." Our Catholic faith has always been countercultural. Our Lord, along with countless followers, were all put to death for their adherence to her teachings. The world around us says that we should keep our beliefs to ourselves whenever they go against the tyranny of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We fear speaking truth because now, unfortunately, truth is in the minority. Congress just passed a bill where stating something as basic as the biblical teaching of who killed Jesus could land you in jail. But make no mistake, before we even attempt to fix any of the issues plaguing society, we must first get our own house in order, and it starts with our leaders. The bishops and priests appointed by God as our spiritual fathers must be rightly ordered. There's not enough time today for me to list all the stories of priests and bishops misleading their flocks, but none of us can blame ignorance anymore and just blindly proclaim that that's what Father said. Because sadly, many priests we are looking to for leadership are the same ones who prioritize their hobbies or even photos with their dogs and matching outfits for the parish directory. It's easy for us laymen and women to think that in order for us to be holy, that we must be active in our parish and try to fix it. Yes, we absolutely should be involved in supporting our parishes, but we cannot be the source for our parish priests to lean on to help with their problems.
So there's a first 5-minute chunk from what Mr. Butker had to say. I'll just go with some comments that I had, or some things that I heard, Sean, and you can add in on this.
Mm-hmm.
He starts out, and I mean, so he's setting the theme. He's setting the theme for this whole thing. Bad leaders who don't stay in their lane, who are driven by bad policy, poor decision making. The thing that first got a lot of people's attention, I think, was the comment of where he lopped in together IVF, euthanasia, and abortion all together in the same sentence.
And surrogacy.
Oh, I forgot. I knew there was one I was forgetting. And surrogacy. So, and I was discussing this with my wife today. I said, hey, this is what we're going to do with the show tonight. And I told her some of the things that Harrison Butker said. As being people who went through, we did IVF. Before we adopted, we did IVF. And Catholics' biggest hang up with IVF, I think, is the Catholic Church. Not necessarily Catholics, because I know Catholics who have done IVF, but it's like, you're freezing embryo, or you're freezing life, you're keeping it on a whole blah, blah, blah. My wife said, hey, we did it Catholic friendly. We used what we used what we had. We signed off on and said, this is what we want done. This is how it's going to be. And I was if I'm going to be offended by anything that he had to say with this, was lumping me in my situation with euthanasia and abortion, and surrogacy. I mean, I could probably say hundreds of surrogate mothers who have done surrogacy for a friend, who have helped out friends in need, carry a fertilized egg, I don't know. What was your, out of the gate, what did you think?
Yeah, that was the first big takeaway that I got right off the jump, were his thoughts on surrogacy and IVF. When you are, he'll come, as you listen to more of this speech, he will fly his far right flag, as some might say. But it is so interesting to me that he decides to lump surrogacy and IVF into the same category as euthanasia and abortion.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's because his stance is surrogacy is not a quote unquote natural planning. IVF is not natural planning. And we know how Mother Teresa was with the Africans, that if you have sex with a condom, then you're, that's bad in Jesus's eye. Hence why, the AIDS epidemic continued to be a
Right,
huge issue
right.
in Africa. So thanks, Mother Teresa. You were a real piece of shit. But I think, again, I wouldn't go out on a limb. I would say that Harrison Buckner would probably consider himself very pro-life. And I think that when we look at surrogacy, and when we look at things like IVF, those individuals are probably some of the most pro-life people that we're talking about here, that they want to bring life into this world. And if they can't do it naturally, is Harrison Buckner to say that, yes, because you can't do it naturally, then you do not have the right. And if you attempt, then I am going to lump you into the group of people that I would consider immoral because they have an abortion, or I would consider immoral because they commit euthanasia, which is a whole completely different animal altogether.
If I'm to,
But that's what's troubling is I know people that have used IVF to have children. I know individuals that have gone through surrogacy. And so I don't know. This is just such a weird way to start this commencement speech to college students. And I get Benedictine College, for those that don't know, is a pretty.
Where is this? Where are you going to go with? You're speaking to college students, and
Right.
I just want to read this. So the church's official stand. This is through Principal Church Teachings. They pronounced their main teachings in a piece called Evangelium Vitae in 1995 and Dignitas Personae in 2008. The church says no to IVF due to the massive destruction of embryonic life, the assault on the meaning of the conjugal act, and the treatment of the child as a product, not a gift. So, but they do announce a loud yes to life, endeavoring to take care of the human embryo, the least of our quote-unquote brothers and sisters. So, to me, it sounds like it's a yes and a no from the church. So, that's kind of an interesting point. So, but let's go ahead and dive into the. One other thing I did want to make here before we get into the next five. I did like his statement. He said we need to stop pretending to be the church of nice. He said, and how the church has remained silent. Being private, hidden away, harmless, and that's what social standards. And I do agree with him. And he said, but he also, and the last thing that we ended up there with was, he said we need to get our own house in order first. I thought when I first heard that, I thought, okay, he's going to address all the priest abuse scandal and everything else like that, but he
never
didn't.
do. They never do.
He never did, which that very much disappointed me. If you're going to say we need to get our house in order first, he kind of just went to the tip of the iceberg and saying that priests and bishops need to stop misleading their flock. So, but anyway, so let's go on to the next part here.
Just as we look at the relationship between a father and his son, so too should we look at the relationship between a priest and his people. It would not be appropriate for me to always be looking to my son for help when it is my job as his father to lead him. St. Jose Maria Escriva states that priests are ordained to serve and should not yield to temptation to imitate lay people, but to be priests through and through. Tragically, so many priests revolve much of their happiness from the adulation they receive from their parishioners, and in searching for this, they let their guard down and become overly familiar. This undue familiarity will prove to be problematic every time because, as my teammate's girlfriend says, familiarity breeds contempt. St. Jose Maria continues that some want to see the priest as just another man. That is not so. They want to find in the priest those virtues proper to every Christian and indeed every honorable man: understanding, justice, a life of work, priestly work in this instance, and good manners. It is not prudent as the laity for us to consume ourselves in becoming amateur theologians so that we can decipher this or that theological teaching, unless, of course, you are a theology major. We must be intentional with our focus on our state in life and our own vocation. And for most of us, that says married men and women. Still, we have so many great resources at our fingertips that it doesn't take long to find traditional and timeless teachings that haven't been ambiguously reworded for our times. Plus, there are still many good and holy priests, and it's up to us to seek them out. The chaos of the world is unfortunately reflected in the chaos in our parishes, and sadly, in our cathedrals too. As we saw during the pandemic, too many bishops were not leaders at all. They were motivated by fear of being sued, fear of being removed, fear of being disliked. They showed by their actions, intentional or unintentional, that the sacraments don't actually matter. Because of this, countless people died alone without access to the sacraments, and it's a tragedy we must never forget. As Catholics, we can look to so many examples of heroic shepherds who gave their lives for their people, and ultimately, the church. We cannot buy into the lie that the things we experienced during COVID were appropriate. Over the centuries, there have been great wars, great famines, and yes, even great diseases, all that came with a level of lethality and danger. But in each of those examples, church leaders leaned into their vocations and ensured that their people received the sacraments. Great saints like St. Damien of Malachi, who knew the dangers of his ministry, stayed for 11 years as a spiritual leader to the leper colonies of Hawaii. His heroism is looked at today as something set apart and unique, when ideally, it should not be unique at all. For as a father loves his child, so a shepherd should love his spiritual children too. That goes even more so for our bishops, these men who are present-day apostles. Our bishops once had adoring crowds of people kissing their rings and taking in their every word, but now relegate themselves to a position of inconsequential existence. Now, when a bishop of a diocese or the bishops' conference as a whole puts out an important document on this matter or that, nobody even takes a moment to read it, let alone follow it. No. Today, our shepherds are far more concerned with keeping the doors open to the chancery than they are with saying the difficult stuff out loud. It seems that the only time you hear from your bishops is when it's time for the annual appeal, whereas we need our bishops to be vocal about the teachings of the church, setting aside their own personal comfort and embracing their cross. Our bishops are not politicians, but shepherds. So instead of fitting in the world by going along to get along, they too need to stay in their lane and lead. I say all of this not from a place of anger, as we get the leaders we deserve. But this does make me reflect on staying in my lane and focusing on my own vocation and how I can be a better father and husband and live in the world, but not be of it. Focusing on my vocation while praying and fasting for these men will do more for the church than me complaining about her leaders. Because there seems to be so much confusion coming from our leaders, there needs to be concrete examples for people to look to in places like Benedictine, a little Kansas college built high on a bluff above the Missouri River, are showing the world how an ordered, Christ-centered existence is the recipe for success. You need to look no further than the examples all around this campus, where over the past 20 years, enrollment has doubled, construction and revitalization are a constant part of life, and people, the students, the faculty and staff, are thriving. This didn't happen by chance. In a deliberate movement to embrace traditional Catholic values, Benedictine has gone from just another liberal arts school with nothing to set it apart to a thriving beacon of light and a reminder to us all that when you embrace tradition, success, worldly and spiritual, will follow.
So interesting, that right there, that last statement right there is the conservative of conservative statements. When you follow tradition, success will follow. That's a callback to, this. So this last 5 minutes was I don't know if I want to take it as saying scolding the church. He said, I don't want to say this out of anger, but it needs to be said, that priests shouldn't imitate lay people. And of course I love the stab at Swifty there. The familiarity breeds contempt. I was that little stab at Swifty, whatever, I guess. I'm sure Travis Kelce will throw a block into him or something. I don't know. But the whole thing about during the pandemic, how the priest dropped the ball, that one kind of, we're coming up on we're going to be in the 4-year anniversary, actually going on the 5th-year anniversary of COVID. I mean, how else? My question to that guy is, how else did you expect people to handle? How do you expect them to handle the pandemic? Because it wasn't like those guys could get in to see him in the hospital or anything like that. So, and then the other thing
Sorry,
that
I
he
was
said,
muted there.
no, that's okay. The other thing that he said though was, and we've had this conversation before, that the church is going along to get along. Going along to get along. I agree. I agree with that statement. Probably one of the few things that I really do. I mean, there's a couple other things that I think we'll get to in the next 2 segments here, as we're about halfway through the speech now. But one thing that I do agree with, and you can feel free to disagree with me or whatever, but one of the problems that I have as a person who, I'm a moderate person. I have some conservative values. I believe that I also have some progressive values that, as far as saying that where change needs to occur. But when the church, I think the church as a whole has dropped the ball when it comes to standing up to things that traditionally, and this is kind of, I think, what Harrison Butker was getting to, traditionally the things that we say are wrong. And this is what triggered, although he didn't mention the LGBTQ community. I was watching the Young Turks, which is another podcast. I was watching a little bit of the Young Turks today. And the Young Turks said, Harrison Butker was turning this into a hate speech rally. And for that very reason that I think that, he mentions tradition and he mentions, but it goes back to that previous statement of getting along, stop being the church of nice and stop going along to get along. So the church needs to start calling a duck and being okay with that. Because, I mean, if you really want to get to it, let's look at the numbers. Church attendance across the United States is down. And the church is trying to be more the term that I use is seeker friendly, to attract people in. So yes, we will allow this and we will allow that and we will allow this sin and this sin and this sin. But, we want you to feel comfortable and not to be offended. So we're going to allow the thing, it's not, to me, it's all in the delivery. I'm not going to condemn, because I've said before, I'm not going to condemn somebody of a sin. If I do that, I look at myself, I say, okay, I'm a person who is gluttonous, who is lazy sometimes, and I bear those sins. Okay? Other people deal with addiction, whether it's to drugs or alcohol or porn or whatever their addiction is to. You don't cast those people out, but at the same time, I go back to the whole thing of love the sinner, hate the sin. So, I mean, this is where it kind of, I think people start, this is the beginning of it being taken out of context. And you may think, I mean, am I out of line by thinking that, or do you think is that a little bit too bold, or what do you think?
Well, so that's just where we're at with the context of where his speech is at the moment. And as he kind of gets a little bit farther into it, some of the other kind of things come out. I think he is treading the line very carefully, which again is kind of hypocritical in how he's going about this speech, because he is saying things like like you said, we don't need to be the church of nice, yet he will tiptoe around some of the certain things that he knows would get him in a lot more fire for saying throughout this speech, so he was quick to go on about, about the abortion and IVF at the beginning, but now he's not being vocal about saying at the moment, what he wants to say of, we shouldn't be letting men go into women's bathrooms. We shouldn't be allowing this. We shouldn't be allowing this. He's doing his part to tread that line, which again, is ironic considering what he's going on about, that the church has been tiptoeing the line for too long.
Well, and that's
And then we also get into the part that when he's talking about, priest failed people,
yeah,
because they died, without
alone.
having their last rites
Right.
read. And here's the thing, I know many of people that worked in the healthcare, sector during COVID's peak, and the amount of people that were in there. First and foremost, like, hospitals typically have assigned
Chaplain.
pastors to
Right.
them.
Right.
That's typically kind of how it usually works. Now, people can make special requests for it to be certain individuals, absolutely. But COVID was a little bit of a different beast, where there was a lot of outside people not allowed, and it wasn't like priests weren't.
Right.
What did you want him to do? Kick the door down and get
Right.
arrested? And, like,
Exactly.
what are we talking about here? So it's not like priests weren't willing. Saying that priests weren't willing is again just not the correct answer. It's people just weren't allowed.
Our friend of the
And it's
podcast,
not.
our friend
Mhm.
of the podcast, Matt Edelman, who's been on before, who is a chaplain for one of the largest hospitals in Louisville, Kentucky, spoke to that fact. I mean, that they were very limited as to who could come in, what pastors could come in, even if they were Catholic. I mean, they had, I think he said, but some hospitals just didn't have that. So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, so I mean, there's all, coming out swinging like he did, getting on to our political leadership right away, now getting into church leadership. But again, like you had mentioned, tiptoeing around things like we had talked about, where, us as Catholics need to, um, we need to take a stand against the wrongs that, is happening within our church, and then doesn't mention the sexual molestation cover
No,
up scandals for that took place over decades and decades and decades in the Catholic Church. So it's, let's address, certain things, but then again, because he knows, like, I don't want to lose all my endorsement deals, I don't want to lose
well, and yeah,
all this, I don't want, and we'll get
exactly.
into this, I don't want my wife to have to get a job, which we'll get
We'll
into
get to that
later
in a
on.
second. Yeah.
But he does it to where he avoids, flat out saying certain things yet, and he'll get into more that
Yep.
again caught him heat later on as you guys continue to listen.
All right, here we go.
I am certain the reporters at the AP could not have imagined that their attempt to rebuke and embarrass places and people like those here at Benedictine wouldn't be met with anger, but instead met with excitement and pride. Not the deadly sin sort of pride that has an entire month dedicated to it, but the true God-centered pride that is cooperating with the Holy Ghost to glorify Him. Reading that article now shared all over the world, we see that in the complete surrender of self and a turning towards Christ, you will find happiness. Right here in a little town in Kansas, we find many inspiring lay people using their talents. President Minnis, Dr. Swafford, and Dr. Zimmerer are a few great examples right here on this very campus that will keep the light of Christ burning bright for generations to come. Being locked in with your vocation and staying in your lane is going to be the surest way for you to find true happiness and peace in this life. It is essential that we focus on our own state in life, whether that be as a layperson, a priest, or religious. Ladies and gentlemen of the class of 2024, you are sitting at the edge of the rest of your lives. Each of you has the potential to leave a legacy that transcends yourselves and this era of human existence. In the small ways, by living out your vocation, you will ensure that God's church continues and the world is enlightened by your example. For the ladies present today, congratulations on an amazing accomplishment. You should be proud of all that you have achieved to this point in your young lives. I want to speak directly to you briefly because I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you. How many of you are sitting here now, about to cross this stage, and are thinking about all the promotions and titles you are going to get in your career? Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world. I can tell you that my beautiful wife, Isabel, would be the first to say that her life truly started when she began living her vocation as a wife and as a mother. I'm on this stage today and able to be the man I am because I have a wife who leans into her vocation. I'm beyond blessed with the many talents God has given me, but it cannot be overstated that all of my success is made possible because a girl I met in band class back in middle school would convert to the faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, homemaker. She's the primary educator to our children. She's the one who ensures I never let football or my business become a distraction from that of a husband and father. She is the person that knows me best at my core, and it is through our marriage that, Lord willing, we will both attain salvation. I say all of this to you because I have seen it firsthand, how much happier someone can be when they disregard the outside noise and move closer and closer to God's will in their life. Isabel's dream of having a career might not have come true, but if you asked her today if she has any regrets on her decision, she would laugh out loud without hesitation and say, heck no. As a man who gets a lot of praise and has been given a platform to speak to audiences like this one today, I pray that I always use my voice for God and not for myself. Everything I am saying to you is not from a place of wisdom, but rather a place of experience. I am hopeful that these words will be seen as those from a man not much older than you, who feels it is imperative that this class, this generation, and this time in our society must stop pretending that the things we see around us are normal. Heterodox ideas abound even within Catholic circles, for let's be honest, there is nothing good about playing God with having children, whether that be your ideal number or the perfect time to conceive. No matter how you spin it, there is nothing natural about Catholic birth control. It is only in the past few years that I have grown encouraged to speak more boldly and directly, because as I mentioned earlier, I have leaned into my vocation as a husband and father, and as a man. To the gentlemen here today, part of what plagues our society is this lie that has been told to you that men are not necessary in the home or in our communities.
Okay, we'll stop it right there because before we get into the men part, I want to address the woman part, and that's right at 15 minutes. So we have about 5 minutes left. The stab right at the beginning, I don't know if anybody picked it up or not, but he did make another stab at, having godly pride, not like the pride that has a whole month dedicated to it. Again, so this is where LGBTQ community got bent out of shape over that. But so he goes into this, and again, I'll just read my notes, and then Sean, you go from there. He talks about leaving a legacy, live out your legacy, okay? So he goes to women first that, been told diabolical lies. You can be successful he said, you can be successful in your career. This is where I think some of this was, and I'll just preface this whole thing by saying this is where I think some of his stuff was taken out of context. And again, if we disagree on this, it's fine. We don't get butthurt over it. But to me, what he was saying here was when he kept on saying leaning into your vocation and I don't think in this sense he was talking about a job vocation, but as your vocation, as your calling in life. The way I look at my life, I want to look at my life is that I'm a Christ follower first. I'm a Christian first. And then I am a husband, and then I am a father, and then I am a teacher, and then, on down, and then I'm a coach, but to me, that is what's at the top. Those top 3 things: being a Christian, being a father, being a husband. Okay, and then being a teacher. And so when I think he was talking about, he said, to you women, look forward, you're not only I hope you, and he never said, hey, you shouldn't have a successful career. He did say, many of you will go on to lead successful careers and, but you shouldn't just be looking at the promotion and dollar signs. You should also look forward to your vocation as, as a wife and a mother. Okay? When he says a wife who, he says a wife who leans into her vocation, that's, and then he makes reference to his wife. Okay? Now, granted, I don't even know what the base salary is for an NFL, even a kicker, what, $500,000, $1 million, probably, something like that. So, I mean, they're not hurting, but he said his wife was the, title of the homemaker. And I think within liberal radical circles, the word homemaker is almost a curse word. It's a swear word. But I don't like, the thing that I disagree with on this is that that's the role only of the wife. Okay? When I look at my role as a husband, it's not the wife's job solely, and this is, again, my opinion. I don't think it's the wife's job solely to be the quote unquote homemaker. Okay? It's not like my wife has my fresh brewed coffee waiting for me as soon as I walk in the door and hands me my house slippers and my pipe so I can go, be Ward Cleaver, from Leave It to Beaver on the couch, But, that, she says she's the primary educator. She supports him. And I thought an interesting quote that he said was, happiness is ignoring the outside noise and following the will of God, which is a baseline statement, whether you're Catholic, whether you're Protestant, whatever you are. That's a baseline statement for any Christian, is that you need to ignore the outside noise and follow God's will. And, and then he goes on to say how the generation needs to call out things that are wrong. So the comment I think that he made, and again, I'll let you have your spiel out of here, but I think that it was taken out of context and that it was, I don't know. What's your thoughts there?
See, based off of what he has said previously and from start to this point of the speech, I don't think it was taken out of context. I'm with you where when you say vocation, it wasn't when I wake up, coffee. When I leave the house, the dishes are done. I come home. There's a warm. I don't. Right. I'm with you where I don't think it was that. Now, to his credit, he says he is not a professional speaker. However, what gets me is you are at a college commencement. Okay, you are at a graduation ceremony of individuals. Let's just say 50% of these individuals are women who are graduating with a degree. And when you go, and ladies, I'd like to speak to you. You have been lied to about the excitement that you should be having for your promotions, because I see in your head, you're excited about the promotions, you're excited about the jobs, but just know the most important position for you is the homemaker of the house. And that is, while if we take it, if he's saying homemaker because of the importance of the role of a woman in a household, absolutely. However, hindsight's 2020. Time and place. Know
know your
it
crowd.
Is okay.
Know the room.
Know your audience. You are speaking to women who just spent the last 4 years of their lives, maybe even more, working their ass off trying to get a job to better their life. There could have been a woman in that crowd that was already a mother that had been busting her ass to get a better job, to do to do better things. Yeah. And so I don't know. That part to me was
I guess
almost I don't want to use the word insensitive, but and mind you, also, like, Harrison has to look at it from a realistic perspective, because he is not, and maybe he has, but he has not gone on to talk about how privileged his situation is compared to other people. Congratulations, man. You make millions of dollars. Right. You are a multi-millionaire. You can pump your wife filled with kids till the end of your days. Congratulations, homie. Are you? What are you gonna do when the eggs run out? Are you gonna go find one that can actually do the job naturally for you?
Right.
Like,
Right.
my thing is, you know,
There is,
let's not act like back in, in World War II, when men were off to fight, women were working, women became more independent. Anytime, there's a situation, women have stepped up to the plate and they've done what's best for them. And so I don't know, it's just, when he throws in the emotion of this girl that he fell in love with in
right.
junior high and she found the faith, like, I get, you're trying to make this sentimental speech, but in the same token,
No, you're
these women don't care about that.
right.
They just got their degree.
And they're
Like, you're
ready
a
to move.
pro football player who has done amazing things for your career. You've won several Super Bowls, you have endorsement deals, you're paid millions of dollars. You're talking to people who might, for the first part of their life, have to pick between, if I have a child, if I throw away the Catholic birth control that you talk about, am I going to be able to afford to feed this family,
Right.
Harrison? And that's where, again, it's, for him, it's really easy because he can cosplay the housewife lifestyle and put his
Well,
wife in a dress and a corset and
you
do
just
that whole
you
thing.
pointed that out. A thing that you and I kind of tossed around in our group chat today was a stat chart that had just come out. I don't know if it was yesterday or today. Basically, that the average income that a family needs to live "quote unquote" comfortably in the United States averages around $250K a year. And so, to make that statement, I agree with you on that part. You're talking to you're talking to a room of people who are like, yeah, but I'm not. I get that point. I get that point. The way I totally respect what you're saying there, and I still think that it's like, okay, be excited about. I think it's, to me, it was saying, be excited about being a professional, but don't neglect your. And this is where it can be not viewed. Oh, your role is being a woman, and your role is being a mother, there's some people who are mothers I don't think should be mothers right now. Okay?
There's like, if there was ever a time for the government to get involved on who or who shouldn't have kids, it's now. It's now. No, I'm just kidding. But Jesus, I'm with, you're in the schools. I see kids constantly, and I'm
babies
like,
having babies. Yep.
dog, your parents should still be living with their parents. Like,
Yep.
what is going on?
Yep. All right, let's look at the last 5 minutes here.
As men, we set the tone of the culture, and when that is absent, disorder, dysfunction, and chaos set in. This absence of men in the home is what plays a large role in the violence we see all around the nation. Other countries do not have nearly the same absentee father rates as we find here in the U.S., and a correlation could be made in their drastically lower violence rates as well. Be unapologetic in your masculinity, fighting against the cultural emasculation of men. Do hard things. Never settle for what is easy. You might have a talent that you don't necessarily enjoy, but if it glorifies God, maybe you should lean into that over something that you might think suits you better. I speak from experience as an introvert who now finds myself as an amateur public speaker and an entrepreneur, something I never thought I'd be when I received my industrial engineering degree. The road ahead is bright. Things are changing, society is shifting, and people, young and old, are embracing tradition. Not only has it been my vocation that has helped me and those closest to me, but not surprising to many of you, should be my outspoken embrace of the traditional Latin Mass. As you move on from this place and enter into the world, know that you will face many challenges. Sadly, I'm sure many of you know of the countless stories of good and active members of this community who, after graduation and moving away from the Benedictine bubble, have ended up moving in with their boyfriend or girlfriend prior to marriage. Some even leave the church and abandon God. It is always heartbreaking to hear these stories, and there is a desire to know what happened and what went wrong. What you must remember is that life is about doing the small things well, setting yourself up for success, and surrounding yourself with people who continually push you to be the best version of you. I say this all the time, that iron sharpens iron. It's a great reminder that those closest to us should be making us better. If you are dating someone who doesn't even share your faith, how do you expect that person to help you become a saint? If your friend group is filled with people who only think about what you're doing next weekend and are not willing to have those difficult conversations, how can they help sharpen you? As you prepare to enter into the workforce, it is extremely important that you actually think about the places you are moving to. Who is the bishop? What kind of parishes are there? Do they offer the TLM and have priests who embrace their priestly vocation? Cost of living must not be the only arbiter of your choices, for a life without God is not a life at all, and the cost of salvation is worth more than any career. I'm excited for the future, and I pray that something I have said will resonate as you move on to the next chapter of your life. Never be afraid to profess the one holy, Catholic, and apostolic church, for this is the church that Jesus Christ established, through which we receive sanctifying grace. I know that my message today had a little less fluff than is expected for these speeches, but I believe that this audience and this venue is the best place to speak openly and honestly about who we are and where we all want to go, which is heaven. I think.
Okay, well, that's pretty much the end of it, and I didn't want us to go too much over time, but men set the tone of the culture, and absentee fathers are why we have violence, degradation in society, and the lies that are told to them by society about masculinity and unapologetic masculinity. In my opinion, there is no happy balance. There really isn't, because we have toxic masculinity when we talk about, like, what's the guy, Andrew, oh, help me out here. The guy who had the sex trafficking ring and all that stuff and everything, and then got in trouble with it.
Jeffrey Epstein.
No, not Jeffrey.
Talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
No, the guy who was the commentator, had a podcast, and
Andrew Tate?
Yeah, Andrew Tate. Yeah. Okay. And so you have men who just call it what it is, men who are afraid to establish authority in their house, and then you have men who are just totally on the far end of the spectrum, who are just this, just the word I'm looking for is escaping me right now, but these misogynistic, over the top guys. And so
it's hilarious. Like I actually know an individual that I not really a friend, but an acquaintance that I've met and still follow pretty actively on the social network, who is at church every Sunday and is very much, God, has abandoned us because of, trans people and all this, that, or the other, and how it should be, a man in the household and blah, 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 blah. And his full-time career is selling lingerie to strippers and going to strip clubs every single night to sell the lingerie to.
Oh my God.
So.
Oh, wait a minute. That needs one of these.
So my thing is, hey man, you are the epitome of preaching and having your cake and eating it too.
Yeah.
It's like,
oh my God.
It's same thing, like, but he's also a big Andrew Tate worshiper. So it goes to show.
Who was the guy? The guy who was fired from Fox, tanning your nuts and all that stuff. Whatever his name was, that guy.
Tucker Carlson was tanning his balls.
Tucker Carlson, and his whole thing. Sun tan my nuts and blah 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 blah. And I don't throw. Listen, I know how you are with Tony, and it's the same way with Janine and I. We look at each other as partners in a relationship. My best friend, Janine, is my best friend. She's my confidant. She's my rock. She's everything. Okay, but I'm not gonna go around and say, "Hey, why is my house dirty?" Or why is the laundry isn't done? Okay, and I don't really buy into a lot of the stuff, and he's critical about people who. The other thing, and I wanted to mention, and then I'll toss it over to you before we get done tonight. Talking about leaving the church, and I do agree with the whole thing about accountability. Iron sharpens iron. Be with people who are going to make you a better person. My dad always said it's hard to fly like an eagle when you're hanging around with a bunch of turkeys. Okay? And I agree with that. If you don't want to be a piece of crap, then don't hang around with a piece of crap. But at the same time, I'm going to say this. The people who I hang with, who I have in my house, the people who come over, are the people. We need to avoid religious elitism, because if we do that, then we're doing the very thing that Christ didn't want us to do, which was, hey, we can't be in this crowd with you because you do this, and this. Okay, I want to go out to where the quote unquote social lepers are at. I want to go out to where because if you aren't a reflection of God to those people, how are we going to expect them to come in? So right. I agree with accountability and having I have an accountability. One of my best friends who we've had on the show, Phil Ward, who was on earlier this season. He's my accountability partner. He's the guy who I go to say, hey, keep me in line. But at the same time, man, we need to be open to everybody. So your final thoughts, Sean?
No, again, some of the stuff that he finished there, I get. I'm with you. Iron sharpens iron. You do want to have those people around you. One of the more interesting things, again, this is just because he doesn't get it, because he's been rich for the last handful of years, and probably from the looks of him, had his ass wiped by his parents growing up and went to a good school.
Yeah,
and
probably.
We cannot say life has been hard ever for old Mr. Harrison.
No.
Except when he, teeters on. I just hope that he has these conversations with Patrick about Jackson. I hope that he's there and talking to him, and your brother's kind of a little scandalous devil there, isn't he, old Patrick? Yeah, a little bit. He gets out there. But
that's great. That's a good invitation. I like that. That's good.
What gets me is don't dictate where you live based off cost of living alone. Like, again, I get the sentiment, but the so far out of the real world kind of sideways comment. And again, but saying it to kids at Benedictine might also, not matter, because I'm sure that not many. There's a good chance that if you're at that school in particularly, you're struggling financially, might not be something that you're dealing with. Well, I don't want to lump everyone into that.
Right.
That group. But
I'm 45 minutes from my church. I put in and I'm not saying this to be braggadocious. I put in 180 miles every Sunday. 45 miles up, 45 miles back. And then for youth, 45 miles up, 45 miles back. I do that because that's where my congregation is. Should I be involved in my community? Maybe. I am involved. I do volunteer stuff with different stuff in our community, but at the same time, you bloom where you're planted and you go where you need to go. So.
Yep. If I could afford to fly back every weekend to our church in California, I would.
I know you like that.
One of the best experiences.
Yeah.
Well, but again, to our listeners, thank you guys so much. Please leave us your comments, your feedback on Mr. Butker's speech. If you liked it, didn't like it, please, we'd love to know. I had loved doing these watch-alongs and listen-alongs with you guys. They're a lot of fun. We'll definitely, if you guys like those, let us know. We'll continue to kind of do them, because it has been announced that Trump and Biden will be duking it out.
Oh, that's gonna. You want to talk about that? That's gonna. So
that will be a fun watch along. We'll definitely
be great material.
Whatever night of the week is, we'll have to go live and do a watch along.
Be so
with that
good.
One. So
come on, man.
I just got where you have my pudding. I don't have pudding. Pudding's great. It's probably one of the best desserts, but I'm more a Jell-O guy. Anywho.
Oh man,
great talking to you. To our fans, thank you so much. You know what to do. Like, subscribe, be a friend, tell a friend, and we will talk to you all next week.
See you.
Thank you for listening to the Voice of Reason podcast. Be sure to check out our other content on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok.